Okay, so continuing on with web environment integrity, the long-laced document that like you could read in a little bit, but we've got to monologue in order to make it clear as to what the heck is they're trying to do and why they're doing another standard to like check things when I feel like it's in the wrong order. So, yeah. I mean, how do you verify that the web server is there? How do you do this attestation with an SSH when you get an SSH and exploitation? It becomes we're verifying the users instead of verifying the server is safe. Or are we doing that both ways? Anyway, so challenges and threats to address. Hopefully they address some of this here. Quality of attesters. Web environment integrity does not prescribe a list of specific attesters or conditions the attesters need to meet to become an attester. Browsers should publish their privacy requirements for attesters and allow websites to evaluate each attester's utility on its own merit. Browsers should also be given the option to opt out from the attesters that do not meet their personal quality expectations. So this becomes yeah, you can do your own attestation instance, but then at the same time, the browser verifies with the attester, but the attester still has to verify with the server that you're trying to access. So how does this not limit web browsers when the web page won't relay the information it's supposed to without getting a proper attestation? If a web browser doesn't have this implemented, then you're limiting the web browsers that can implement it. Well, you just have to implement it. But what if they don't want to? Again, it becomes an issue of you're limiting the web browsers because all of a sudden it becomes, oh, we're just going to do this thing and whoop-de-doo, just implement it. And it's like, but we don't want to. That violates privacy. Well, you have to if you want to access the internet. So, tracking users' browser history. Just a second here. Okay. User agents will not provide any browsing information to attesters when requesting a token. We are researching an issuer-attester split that prevents the attester from tracking users at scale, while allowing for a limited number of attestations to be inspected for debugging, with transparency reporting and auditability. So there are a lot of people that already spoof their user agent strings, and there are a lot of programs that do it too. So this becomes an issue of, if they say that attesters, they will not like limit who can be an attester and that there's no like, conditions for becoming one, then anyone can set up their own attestation server and we're back at square one basically. They've done nothing to make anything secure. All they've done is added another layer of useless crap to basically limit your use of the internet, in essence. Who's going to set up their own attestation server? How many people are going to do that? Not many. There will be a few, but for the most part, they're going to go through Google or Microsoft or Amazon for their attestation, or Apple even. And then those entities are going to be able to decide whether they get to access websites or not. Again, if we look earlier in here, they said, what is it? They said in here somewhere that they were not trying to limit a user's ability to use certain web browsers. But here they're talking about web browsers being used in the attestation process and it being implemented in web browsers. So they've already like talked over themselves about it and browsing history. So it's like, is this going to be implemented in web browsers or is it not? I'm confused here. I'm getting a lot of mixed messages. I don't know if we're like going to punch each other in the face or we're going to make out. Okay. Fingerprinting. This explainer requires the contents of the attestation payloads to be signed. Those contents cannot be tampered with or else they will not be trustworthy. Only attesters can include information that can identify users and devices. So now it comes to, what if the attestation server is compromised? This is where the issue comes in, is you're using a server, you've included another point of failure into this process that becomes that you are more so relying on, and so it becomes a weak point again. All fields returned by attesters must be low entropy so as not to be uniquely identifying. For example, attesters may specify low, medium, high for a trust score instead of a continuous numeric value. The attestation payloads will only include information about device and application integrity, as attesters will not have access to the profile information in applications. How can we ensure attesters are not returning high entropy responses? In the near term for experimentation, the tester should publicly declare that they are testing to with readable and verifiable verdicts. They should, if you are implementing this, they should always do this, not just for testing. It should be transparent to the person up front about what's going on. Just like we have with HTTPS, that we can see the transparency of the certificate. Beyond the experimentation phase, we need verifiable method to enforce low entropy responses. We would like to explore options like splitting the attester and token issuer functions from one role to two independent organizations, where the token issuer can verify the attestation response meets the entropy requirements. So you've got two entities that they are proposing splitting this into. So you've got, this creates two more points of failure, but also makes it so that these two functions can't be compromised at the same exact time. They can both be compromised, but it will take a little bit more of a process to compromise them both. Now, this doesn't tell us whether it verifies SSH services or sessions or what have you. We're talking mostly about web applications and websites throughout this whole thing. We're not doing it for web browsers. We're not doing it for web browsers, as it said in the beginning, but we're going to do it for web browsers, and it's going to be the best, and it's going to be the greatest. Cross-site tracking. While attestation tokens will not include information to identify unique users, the attestation tokens themselves could enable cross-site tracking if they are reused between sites. Okay, so we've already got a lot of this. Sites already scraping for cookies from other sites. This is why in applications like Firefox or in various extensions for Chromium, they implement cookie jars and cookie containerization, because then one website can't go and dig into the cookies from another website. But now you are sending those cookies or those cross-site tracking stuff to another server, and they're saying that they're going to try and secure against cross-site tracking using the system, because apparently the users haven't done a good job of preventing cross-site tracking on their own systems. For example, two colluding sites could work out that the same user visited their sites if a token contains any unique cryptographic keys and was shared between their sites. Again, this already happens. Single sign-on is a thing. The browser must enforce top-level partitioning for all attester tokens, so that no two domains can conspire to track the users across sites using this mechanism. Google, hello? How many sites have you conspired with? We also intend to limit linkability between relying parties, websites requesting attestation, and the attester in a way that prevents scaled tracking, even if the attester were to collude with websites while allowing for debugging of broken attestations. Okay. Let's go back to this one. We're not going to track your browsing history using a user agent, because we're going to try and do a tokenization so that we don't see what browser you're on, what OS you're on, and things like that. So, oh, wait. Let's actually issue a tester split. So what about the IP address? So if we're talking about user agents, you can sometimes glean information about a system and things like that without using a user agent. And then you're tokenizing the user agent, so you technically don't get the user agent in the exact browser that they're using, but you still have a token. And apparently you're taking those tokens and splitting them up from sites so that they can't be tracked across it. But is there one per device, is there one single attester that is being used? If my device is linked to a certain attester, then that attester can see which sites I'm visiting because of the tokens that are being requested. Guys, come on. The partitioning will be different for different profiles. Incognito profiles get different partitions, even if it's the same site the user visited on the regular profile. This already happens locally. How are you going to tokenize the IP address as well? Hello? The user should also be able to reset the state that produces these tokens, breaking linkability even with the same partition. This is a session reset. I think we do this a couple times already because we can reset TCP sessions. All you're proposing is a TCP session, and we've already... The attestation metadata itself should strive for minimal entropy while providing useful confidence levels, enumerations, and/or binary indicators. So again, IP addresses, things that you can track with. If they're using an IPv6 address, how are you routing that through so that you're not tracking them? Because an IPv6 address is much more like trackable than an IPv4 address. An IPv4 address is still somewhat trackable though. I'm seeing a disconnect here of what like you were saying the goals were and what the introduction says and what's actually being said in the implementation and the design specs. Detailed design discussion. When it comes to billion QPS traffic, the design needs to be mindful of the bandwidth overhead it adds to the users of the web. Yes, this is what seems to be ignored. Low entropy supposedly means less traffic to worry about. So smaller packets or smaller bits of information being sent over, but you're sending multiple small packets, which still clogs up the network. And it can clog up the network more so than like a singular large packet. CBOR minimizes the payload size of requests while still decoding and coding to JSON. WebAuthn has already set a precedent using CBOR. It makes sense to use a similar attestation format in both specifications to encourage adoption. Again, how many payloads are you sending? How many more payloads are you putting onto the network just from this? No matter how small, how many more payloads are there that have to be processed? How does this affect broader browser modifications and extensions? Web environment integrity attests the legitimacy of the underlying hardware and software stack. So if we don't like your extension, well, no. It does not restrict the indicated application's functionality. Example, if the browser allows extensions, the user may use extensions. If a browser is modified, the modified browser can still request web integrity attestation. But who determines whether that environment is safe? You can still, the browser can still request attestation. It doesn't say whether it will be verified in that attestation. It just says that it can still request it. So if I've got an extension that the attester decides is a no-go, then what happens? That's the point. It's like if I have a web extension that the attester doesn't like, and the web server is told, no, they're not trustworthy. The web server that receives the attestation report doesn't know why. Only the attestation server does, according to the spec. So I could do it for any reason that I want to. So if I were to take the web environment integrity spec and say, we are going to reject, say that anybody from a Russian IP is not trustworthy, then I can do that because it's my server and I get to decide. Plain out. So considered alternatives. Make this an extension of the Fetch API. Once a web client has performed initial verification of the environment it runs in, it should have more trust in running attestation requests locally. Decoupling attestation requests from Fetch allows web developers the opportunity to do these checks on calls that matter without adding overhead to the rest. So rather than doing attestation on the local client that is already doing many requests already, we're going to do it on a server over here. So clients are already overborne with such large web applications. We should offload the attestation onto another place rather than onto the client itself. Beyond that, the client could possibly be compromised and say, yeah, of course I'm trustworthy in its own attestation. Just like a web server does when it's compromised. If you access a compromised web server for a legitimate application, of course it's going to be verified and safe. I say it is. And look, the certificate authority says I am too, because I've got their certificate and it lines up. I'm not compromised at all. And then the attestation server over here, like, oh, of course they're trustworthy. I'm not compromised at all. I'd totally let this person on to your system. Like, no, they're not infected at all. They're totally trustworthy. I'm trustworthy. You can trust me. You've already talked to me. Let them on. What are we changing? Privacy Pass and Private Access Token. Apple and Cloudflare have developed private access tokens for a similar use case, and Chrome has also built technologies based on Privacy Pass. However, due to the fully masked token, this technology assumes that the attester can produce sustainable, high-quality attestation without any feedback from websites about gaps, such as false positives or false negatives. Do you not have stats on these? Because normally, a lot of things in security have stats on false positives and false negatives. How does this improve false positive and false negatives? Honestly. We are convinced that the durability of the device attestation solution is a function of adversarial pressure and the defender's ability to continue hardening the system against ever-evolving abuse attacks and techniques. We are thus pursuing a solution that enables debugging of false positives and false negatives while still preventing scaled tracking from the service that tracks its users, has them pay, and still tracks them. So what if the service itself is inflating numbers and charging money for it, and it's not a user that is buying a third-party bot service? So we are allowing the entity that owns the server to cheat, but not the clients that are accessing the server, is what you're saying. That's all I'm saying. And by the way, we're trying to prevent scaled tracking. So, like, are you saying we're preventing tracking at a large scale? Or do you even really care about tracking at all? Because everything, like, you say that you're going to, like, containerize all these tokens and things like that, but you've still got a central server with all the tokens. How do you keep a malicious actor out of all the tokens in an attestation server? Just saying. Anyway, more fun discussion. Yeah. Comments and whatnot, and maybe more on this down the road after I'm done with this thing, because we've got open questions, and then, yeah, that's the last of it. If you enjoyed the video, then like, comment, subscribe, feed the algorithm, boost the video up, share this video with your friends. If you found it informative or you just want to chat, I've got plenty of places in the description, Discord, Guilded, and what have you. Check those out, and I will see you guys in the next one.